We are going to need a lot of these slope pieces before the extension for the Hogwarts is complete. Now, in the previous video, I started to build a 15-stud extension for my Hogwarts Castle and Grounds set. I am using the instructions from JL Bricks and Brickitecture as an inspiration. But I will have to be a bit more selective as I do not have that much space available. In the previous video, I concentrated mostly on this clock tower and the courtyard in front of it. And that section is now pretty much complete. Now, one thing that I didn't mention in the previous video is that I will not have enough space for that wooden bridge in front of the courtyard. I can only fit it in partly. So my version will look something like this. But I will just have to live with this. This is just one aspect of working with limited space. Now I am aiming for movie accuracy when I'm doing this build, but then again, I'm not that strict with it. So I am open for some alterations if I think that the model will look better with those. And I think that the designers of the original set might have had something similar in mind. Because there is one noticeable detail in the original model that isn't movie accurate, at least as far as I know. And that detail is the stream of water in the middle of the model. That chasm does exist between the castle parts, but it appears to be dry. Now, if I am actually mistaken, and there is a shot in the movies where you can see that water, I would be greatly interested of it. So put it down in the comments and I will check it out. But even if that stream of water is not in the movies, I still think that it is a great addition in the Lego model. It adds a pop of color there, and it also makes sense that flowing water would have carved that chasm there between the castle sections. Now, if there is a stream of water there, where does that water come from? Now, in the original model, there is a light gray wedge piece there at the end. That could imply that water comes from under the ground. But I do not think that that would be the most logical explanation. Instead, I want to have some visible water there in my extension. And I decided to use the Hogwarts Legacy game as an inspiration. Now, the castle in the game isn't exactly the same as it is in the movies, but it is quite similar. But then again, I am not trying to build a Hogwarts Legacy version here, but instead use a specific difference as an inspiration. And of course, the difference is the stream of water here. And there is something in the other end here. There is this small lake. And I think that I could definitely try to recreate this in my model. But it would not be an exact match, because in this version, the water comes straight against the castle wall. And I'm not going to modify the original model that much. Now, there is one other interesting water feature here. There is water in the chasm between the clock tower and the main part of the castle. Once again, there is no water here in the movies, but I think that having water here is logical, because over the time, water can definitely create these chasms. So having this stream of water here would once again add more color to my build, and I think that adding these waterfalls in could be an interesting detail. Here you can see a map from the Hogwarts Legacy game. So we are planning to add this bit of water here, and we have to make sure that it connects with the existing stream of water. We also want to add a bit of water here between the castle sections. Once again, I think that this is more than enough of planning, and now we need to continue with the build. So, time to build a stream of water here with some waterfalls. The rock details in the original model gave me a pretty good idea where the water level should be at each point. Those tan and light gray pieces in the middle of the water represent waterfalls, but I didn't have those parts available in Translight Blue. Little by little, I kept adding more water, and actually at this point, we are already at the same level as the stream in the original model. Next, I need to add some rock details on the left-hand side of the stream. But actually, before that, I decided to fill in this water and also design that ghost shape using wedge plates. Those are sort of a base for the rest of the rock features. As a little side project, I built the Ollery according to JL Bricks' instructions. I just wanted to make sure that I won't waste those parts in other parts of my build. Then back to building rocks. Here I am currently working on the section where the clock tower attaches. And I did some slight modifications for the bottom of the tower so that there is room for those rocks. I also added in the attachment point for the wooden bridge. And here you can see that the clock tower is starting to blend in nicely. Putting it back in reminded me that there is a one plate offset at the connecting section at the top here. But that was easily fixed with one additional dark gray plate. Then it was once again time to build some rocks. Now the whole clock tower build is placed on top of jumpers, so it is offset by half a stud. That meant that I had to add these side-mounted tiles for both sides of the courtyard. That way the courtyard is actually 4 studs wide. And of course those tiles will be light grey eventually. And in order to get those tiles attached, I added another layer of bricks for the courtyard to include these snot bricks. And here I just did a test build with some random bricks to see that there are no visible gaps here. Well, there is a small gap there, but I still think that this is the best solution that can be easily achieved. The next part that needed to be built was the support structure for the wooden bridge. Now it is pretty much impossible to build that with that much detail in the scale that we're working with. So there is a need for some sort of a simplified version. I ended up using these bar elements and those rounded 1x2s that have holes in them. First I tried these wrench elements that were used in JL Bricks' instructions, but I think that the end result with these is a bit cleaner. At this point I started to think ahead and started to wonder if one of my assumptions was actually a correct one. And that assumption was the fact that I will have to make this extension so that it splits into 2 parts. That would be needed to get this out of the cabinet, because the cabinet door and the hinges block part of the width. But I realized that the other option would be to tilt the model. Now I had tried tilting with the original Hogwarts model, but due to its size and shape, the tilting was extremely difficult. So that is why a couple of videos ago I modified my Hogwarts Castle and Grounds set so that it splits into 2. Somehow I just assumed that the same is needed for this extension, but actually that was not the case. Because there is water on the left hand side of this build, and the tower is quite far away from that edge, the tilting is actually quite easy to do. So I can keep this as one piece. And of course the version that does not split will be easier to build. And this will also mean that it will be easier to build some sort of small rooms inside the mountain as there are in the original set. But those will be the final details to add in. But before I can get to that point, there is quite a lot of rock details that I must first build. So finally, we are at the fun part. And that is just taking a ton of these slope pieces and trying to come up with good looking rock cliffs. What I'm doing here is that I'm first building the exterior and then I'm sort of backtracking and building the support systems behind those slope pieces. Now while building those rock details, I realized that there is some details missing in the clock tower courtyard. I actually never built those towers that are in the front corners of the courtyard. And as I couldn't come up with a way to add the towers to this build, I decided to add those directly on top of the rock formations. Originally, I tried the position on the left, but I realized that that was just wrong, and I needed to add jumpers to get it to the position shown on the right. Only that one slope piece directly on the right-hand side of the tower has a jumper below it. The rest of the rock details are built along normal studs. In the end, it was just easier to build this kind of a support structure inside the mountain and mount the towers on top of it. And then I just added these half-round tiles to the front for extra detail. And now I think that the clock tower courtyard is complete. And I think that this is a good point to wrap this video up. Of course, we're going to continue the build in the next video. If you want to get a notification as soon as that video is up, you should consider hitting that subscribe button down there. I will upload the next video ASAP, but remember, when a Sloth says that, it means as slowly as possible. Bye bye!